one of the voices of trail running. That's who we have on the show today.
Before we start, I wanted you to do the finish line call of me winning Cocodona.
Well, I can't believe it, but as we approach the midnight hour on Wednesday, Jeff Garmeyer is making his way, taking that left on Birch, heading down Cocodona Alley, and can you believe it? In the shade just before midnight, Jeff Garmeyer is your winner of the 2025 Cocodona 250.
That's who we have on the show today. Welcome to the Free Outside Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Garmeyer. This is the place where we make hard things fun. And usually I say fun things hard, but I don't think that's what we need in today's world. So trail running's at such an interesting point because it's almost like butting its head against the ceiling ready to break through. So, a lot of races sell out, a lot of races have a lottery. There's been this expanse into 300-mile races with Arizona Monster coming up. Thru hikers are crossing into trail running. Trail runners are crossing into thru hiking. But we don't have quite the weight to make things happen yet. Like, protests for public lands are very centered on hunters and fishers and hikers and recreationalists. There's not quite the pull of the industry, but it's growing extremely fast. And that's why I wanted to have on Chris Worden, who has announced Cocodona, Javelina 100, Black Canyon 100. I think he's even announced some of Western states. So he is one of the commentators that's on, but it's not like a normal sport where you're on for an hour or two. He's on for like 12 hours at a time. And so it's pretty fascinating, the stories he has. And I didn't even know this, but he has a history and he grew up wanting to be a broadcaster. So it's pretty fun to get the story there and just hear what he thinks. And I share my incredible idea with him, which he also thinks incredible. So you're going to have to listen to that. And this episode's brought to you by Garage Grown Gear. GGG is what they refer to it as. GarageGrownGear.com. It's a marketplace. I love the Alpha Direct hoodies. I'm actually taking one down to Arizona. I'm doing a training camp down there. And I also volunteer coach for the Special Olympics. And I wore my Sun hoodie out there yesterday. I coach Ben. I actually help coach all of them. But I usually run with Ben, who's pretty quick. He runs about a 6:15 maybe mile in the meet, area meet and state meet that they have out here. So he's pretty good, but it is funny because every week we have the same conversation, and I'm always so thrilled to have it because how my personality is, it's way nicer to know what's coming than just the unknown of standard conversation with people, which is why I live alone and in this dark room. But it's been really fun. It's my favorite time of year, volunteering and doing Special Olympics coaching, because everyone just has a good time out there. They complain, they laugh, sometimes cry. We learn all kinds of new things, like long jump. It is very confusing because jumping off which foot, figuring out which foot to jump on, running up, jumping off the board. It's really fun because we're just knocking down barriers, doing fun stuff out there. So that's what's been going on in my life. The podcast is also brought to you by JohnG.com. I just did a 12-hour race, more the 2-in-1 multi-short. They work great. I also wore the sun hoodie, kept the sun off me even though the sun never came out. But you should check out the sun hoodies. It's sun hoodie season. Make your life better by getting one of them because they are really nice. They have great prints and designs, and they support us, so tell them I sent you so that they stick around. All right, this is Chris Worden. We get into a lot of different topics here, and it's a fun time.
Today on the Free Outside Podcast, we have one of the voices of trail running. We have Chris Worden here. He also has 157, I think, results on UltraSignup, so that's pretty impressive too. But before we start, I wanted you to do the finish line call of me winning Cocodona, just so I have some motivation here.
All right, let's see how we can do this. Well, I can't believe it, but as we approach the midnight hour on Wednesday, Jeff Garmeyer is making his way, and he's taking that left on Beaver, wait, is it Birch Beaver? He's on Beaver, left on Birch. It's been a while. But he's taking that left on Birch, heading down Cocodona Alley, and can you believe it? In the shade just before midnight, Jeff Garmeyer is your winner of the 2025 Cocodona 250.
All right, now I don't even have to run it. We've got that all. So I'm curious, how did you start? How did you get into the live stream commentary?
It's actually kind of wild. So, as we were talking about off the air, I'm an accountant by trade, but prior to that, in a previous life, I was actually in broadcasting. I was in radio, from about age 20 or so until about age 28. And I had done an internship for CBS Sports Radio in Chicago. Worked as a producer and a talk show host in my hometown of Rockford, Illinois. And so I thought that was going to be my career path in my 20s, but I found out a couple things. First of all, radio's pay is awful, and second of all, you can't pay your rent with concert tickets and beer. But an interesting note on how this ties all together. Uh, when I first came in, my first paying job was with a station called WNTA News Talk in Rockford, Illinois. And the first person I worked with in the industry was a guy by the name of Chris Bowman, who is
Wow.
Dylan's late uncle. So I've known his family for 30 years.
Wow. Okay, so you left and had to get a real career that paid the bills, and then how did you end up commentating probably the smallest sport you could ever have imagined commentating?
Well, you never know how small it is until you're doing small town Wisconsin basketball. But the way that I slid into it was that Jamil mentioned that Jamil Curry from Aravaipa wanted to start doing broadcasting. And the first race that we did was Desert Solstice 2018. And I volunteered, raised my hand, and Jamil had known me for a few years at that point because I was a local runner. But I said, "Oh yeah, I've got some broadcasting experience," and I think what happened was that Jamil kind of thought that if you could run 24 hours, you can talk for 24 hours. And I think that he and Patrick Karen and the people that he had on air, I think Skylar was there as well, Skylar Hall, realized that it's much harder to do than maybe they realized, and so it came to a point where it was like all hands on deck. And I was down on trackside filming. And eventually I basically said, "Hey, I'll take a shift in the studio." And Jamil went to take a nap. And when he woke up, I was on and I was kind of reverting into a, radio recapping voice. And he said, "Oh, maybe you can do this." And I have to say, I do like being on the call rather than filming
Yeah.
because some of these runners that we cover are pretty fast. And I will say there was one funny moment that first year when I was trying to catch like an action shot, and I had the gimbal and I'm following along, and there was a group of runners. I think that Zach Bitter was one of them. And I kind of was, coming at them from like a 45-degree angle and then kind of cheating back a little bit, trying to create like a little bit of a cool visual. And I get a text from Jamil saying, don't run alongside them for too long because we don't want to be accused of pacing or anything like that, which I understand, but I also really thought was humorous because if anybody thought I was pacing Zach Bitter on a track, then I guess that seemed like a very interesting visual to me.
Yeah, his 100-mile effort is your sprint pace when
Exactly, exactly.
yeah, because he's still I think he still has the American record for the 100-miler, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're talking, somebody's like sub 11:30, and I mean that's basically my sprint mile at this point in 11:30. So
Yeah, I mean, I think the, studio found a good host in you in there as well. Do you have, like, a most memorable call or event that you like doing the most?
I really love doing Cocodona. It's and Javelina are probably my two favorite races. In different ways. Like Javelina is a full sensory overload. Like there's so much going on, and to the excitement that I love opening the race. I love being there at crack of dawn, even before dawn, and just being out there and catching the atmosphere. Now that we're doing a lot of our events basically course side, it's changed how we feel because we started with the studio that Aravaipa had built, but then we realized you really get a better visual from being out and out on the course. And that's what I love about it the most. I think that the first hour or two of Javelina is my favorite thing to do every year. The second best thing is the final hours of Cocodona. Like that
Yeah,
really gets emotional.
totally. So do you have to just take time off work for that whole week because it consumes your life for Cocodona?
I didn't have to originally, but I realized I have to in terms of an actual functioning mind and body, because the original schedule the first couple years was I would be on the air from whenever we went on, whether it be 5 or 6 a.m. till 8 a.m. Then I would work from 8:30 till about 4:30 or 5 o'clock. And then I would take a quick dinner break and I would go on from 6 p.m. till whenever we went off the air. What I learned is that by Wednesday or Thursday, I was miserable and I was slurring my speech and just really not doing the best broadcasting job I could do. So at this point, I actually do take personal time. I take a couple of half days throughout the week just so I can get some extra rest and recharge my batteries because, I love Cocodona for the fact that I have the opportunity to share so many stories. And,
Yeah.
that's the magical thing, and with a race like that where you've got, 5 days, you have plenty of time to concentrate on the front of the pack, and then, after the first, 5 men, 5 women come through and finish, you've still got 40 hours to go,
Yeah.
and you have, all of these runners that are still trying to write their own story and doing the hardest thing they've ever done, and then you have all this time to learn more about them. And I've learned that the audience really gets emotionally invested in these people that are at the back of the pack. I mean, we saw, the final finisher at Cocodona get the cover of Ultra Running magazine a couple of years ago. That's something that I would have never foreseen. It's usually reserved for podium finishers, but I felt like that photo on the cover that Howie Stern took was what truly what the race is truly about.
Yeah, and I think it kind of symbolizes Aravaipa in general, the ethos there of, I mean, sometimes even runners later in the race will get better aid station stuff than those at the front and everything. And I think it's that really inclusive environment like Javelina, where it's golden ticket on one side, but it's also dress up in costumes and push your limits to 100 miles. It's really amazing how Aravaipa can skirt that line of have competitive races and also fun, push yourself to as much as you can, but we're also gonna cover you, wherever you may be, not just the first place person.
It's been an interesting thing to follow because I first got into the sport about 2014, 2013 is when I first started running trail. And then, yeah, 2014, 2015 is when I ran my first ultras. And back then, the runners were, I guess, I don't want to, no, they were faster. They were like people, the 50K and the ultra marathons they felt a little bit unapproachable by rank and file runners. And and it's not been to everybody's celebration, but Aravaipa has really kind of democratized the running of ultra in my opinion, because like take for instance, we just had the Crown King Scramble this weekend. When I first ran that race in 2014, it had a hard 9 hour cutoff, and then they added an early start for those who might take an extra hour to 10 hours, and now the cutoff is 11 hours, and it enables other people to like the race has exploded. And I think that
Mhm.
that's actually part of why that race and the sport in general has grown, and is that people are starting to see it as more accessible, because at one point it felt like you had to be like maybe a 130, 140 half marathon, or 330 or 330 marathoner to like consider moving up in distance. Nowadays, people are jumping right into the 50K, and that's not always because they're fast runners or elite athletes at all.
Yeah, and that's kind of the whole why it's so good for the world I come from of like through hiking too, is through hikers have done well at Cocodona, but also have no trepidations about finishing it because it's basically a through hike with trail magic at every aid station and stuff too. I think it's also been a really good job marketing by Jamil as well with, films as well as the live stream, as well as coverage and even broadcasting the making of or putting out the behind the scenes the making of like finisher awards. I think it's just really, really smart. I'd love to hear why you think Aravaipa has exploded and sort of surpassed everyone else in the last 15 years.
Well, I think, to kind of circle back around, it is the accessibility of the race. I know
Mhm.
that when I first came in and I first started talking about doing 50Ks as a mid, now back of the packer at this point, people sometimes would, kind of, I guess, poo-poo the idea of that. And a lot of people didn't even really seem keen on sub ultra distances for a lot of the local races. Well, those are where the explosion comes in. First of all, the extended cutoffs, as I mentioned, but also, the idea that, you don't have to jump into a 50K right away. I mean, you can jump into a 5K or a 10K and see whether or not trail is for you. Because I have a lot of road running friends who uh, don't find it their cup of tea at all. They like something where they can get into a rhythm and, basically set it on cruise control. Well, in a fun trail race, a lot of times part of the problem is that you can't set it into cruise control because the terrain is too damn hard.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
like you're gonna go like that was my first frustration when I first learned about trail running, is that the first trail I did, I was trying to maintain a, 9:30, 9:45 pace, and I'm all of a sudden going up a 20% grade and then down one. And the friend of mine who was with me, she said, just take what the trail gives you. And that's kind of been one of the strongest pieces of advice I've ever received. And I know some smart people in this space, and they've never given me anything that contradicts that whatsoever.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of it is it's ever changing. It's fluid from conditions to weather to the terrain you're on. Whereas, so you can't be tied to a watch or pacing versus kind of the marathon ethos is that you have this pace that you hit in workouts and your race pace and everything else. So I think that's the cool part. Where do you think it's going? Because everything sells out so immediately. How are we going to compensate for all these people wanting to do all these races that you're broadcasting?
And Jeff, I don't know. I think about that all the time. I mean, whether it be, where's it going in terms of distance? I mean, you've got, the Arizona Monster coming up, and you've got a 300 miler, you've got Cocodona 250, you've got, more 200-mile races than ever. You've got, in terms of like the competitive level, Western states, you have what now, 220, 230 qualifiers worldwide, and you're drawing for 250 spots in the lottery. There is a potential that we're reaching a saturation point in some ways, but every time I think that, somebody's come up with something crazy new. Like, remember when it seemed like more than 2.5 days at the backyard seemed like an
Oh,
impossible
yeah.
thing? And in just what, 4 or 5 years, we've gone from maybe, 260 to 280 miles being the threshold to all of a sudden we're approaching 5 days now.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
the one thing I've learned about this sport, and it's not just in terms of like people getting faster situation, it's we're learning that what we thought were the boundaries, or maybe the limitations, there just aren't any. Because if you'd have told me that Cocodona was going to be selling out and have thousands of people watching on a daily basis, I would have been somewhat skeptical. But it's
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. Now it sells out in days.
Yeah, I mean, and we got to the point where, we were told, a couple years ago, "Hey, let's open up registration during the race," and all of a sudden, we had, like 100 registrations, while the race was still going on. That's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah. I mean, it's just such insane explosion and then adding to the race with two other distances or three other distances now,
Great, yeah.
right? Yeah. So, yeah, it's really becoming this hub of ultra running. And I think Cocodona is a pretty fair cutoff, but the shorter races have a very approachable one for especially like Sedona Canyons, where it's 125 miles, but you get like 3 days to do it, right?
Yeah, you have 75 hours, I believe, now for Sedona Canyons. I mean, like, you don't have to sweat those cutoffs as long as you've got, like, the ability to basically do 3 thoroughly long day hikes. You can get it
Y-
done. That it's
Yeah.
kind of a weird way to break it down, but I think that's part of the beauty of, as I mentioned, like, you know, Aravaipa making it approachable. I mean, how many other times are you gonna get that much time in a trail race to do 100 plus miles? Like, there's I've gotta say there's just assuming there's very few races where you're going to get the opportunity to do it at like, 1 3/4 mile an hour or thereabouts. I mean,
Yeah.
you could sleep, you can, and also like once you get up that climb at Kasner, like it's fairly flat until the very end.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of the most approachable 100 milers out there, and a good way to get a belt buckle if cutoffs scare you a little bit.
Yeah.
But what goes into the pre-production of going into events? You talked about telling stories and stuff. How do you know what you're going to talk about heading into it? Especially because a lot of these races, they start, you're on the air, but then you don't even know who's doing what for a couple hours.
Yeah. So what I guess I could just go into my approach of how I'm going to prepare for
Totally.
Cocodona. So
Yeah.
I've already started to kind of peruse the list, several weeks out from the race to see who's running, who's not. And from there, obviously, with the elites, the research is somewhat easier. And, for instance, that Courtney Dauwalter's running, that Harry Schubertus is running, that Jeff Garmire's running it. It's like, okay, these are people we're familiar with and we know their stories. And, I'll still do my best to make sure that I'm in depth with the front of the pack. But, we're used a lot of names that we're used to seeing. Now, Harry kind of snuck up on us last year. And so we kind of had to scramble in that case. But in regards to further down, it's just kind of first of all perusing UltraSignup, and maybe I'll do a little bit of creeping on social media to see if they're posting about the race. Also, like one of the things that I love doing. This is one of my favorite ways to do research for Cocodona is that I'll show up in Flagstaff the Friday before the race, and I'll start
Mhm.
wearing Aravaipa and Cocodona gear around town and just walk around to the different coffee shops with nothing to do but just sit and drink coffee, maybe have a beverage somewhere, have a bite to eat, and just basically fishing for engagement. And I've gotten to have some of the best conversations with people, like maybe walking into one of the breweries or one of the coffee shops, and I'll see somebody wearing a Cocodona or a, Moab 240 shirt or something like that. I'm like, oh, you here for Cocodona? And back a few years ago, I wasn't usually recognized. Now, like a lot of times if they're running the race, they'll know who I am, but I'll engage people in conversation and learn their story. And what's really cool is when you're able to use that information and to enrich your broadcast of the event by telling, "Oh, I spoke with this person the other day before the race. They're here to raise money for school kids in another country," which is literally something that's happened. There was a runner a few years ago that was coming from Europe, and he was here to, basically use it as an opportunity to raise money for school children in underprivileged countries. That's the kind of thing we dream of being able to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you just have to be patient enough to work it in at the right moment because you probably have pages and pages of notes.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I mean, my spreadsheets go pretty deep, and also, the one thing that's nice about Cocodona is that I'm able to schedule. I've always been given a lot of latitude and able to schedule guests for the night times. The Aravaipa After Dark, showcase is basically, well, we don't have a lot of cameras on the course, so we're gonna find other ways to talk about the race and keep people engaged, and it becomes less of a reporting the sporting event and more of a, almost like a magazine style, conversation, uh, a feature type show rather than a news-based show. I mean, we're still gonna keep cameras on the course, but if we were to just sit there and uh, have cameras on aid stations and still shots, people are going to get tired of it. So we try and at least back that up with conversation. And that's one of the things I love about the race now being broadcast from Flagstaff, because for a week, I can basically tap into the resources there locally because obviously it's a trail running and ultra running mecca. So I can
Yeah.
call up a Jim Walmsley or a Pete Mortimer or an Eric Senseman and say, "Hey, do you want to come on for a couple hours while we're talking about Cocodona?" And it's such a great opportunity. And when things happen on the show, when on the race, we're able to pivot to it right away. But it's also fun to have some conversations. One of my favorite things that I did last year, and I'm gonna try and do again this year, is find a couple of organizations. Like we did Girls on the Run of Northern Arizona. We had
Mhm.
Kelly Teeslink from their organization, and we basically just did a funds drive, and we raised a modest amount, a few $100, but that was something that, I had the opportunity to do that, I wouldn't normally be able to get to do in like a Black Canyon or a Javelina, because Cocodona, we've got so much more time to play with.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, and it's this platform, this ability to bring people's attention to different things. You really have a lot of power.
Well, it is weird, Jeff, because a few years ago, I was doing this stuff kind of anonymously, and now when I'm out in an event and people recognize me and want to talk to me, and God forbid take selfies with me, I kind of wonder what they're, like why. But it shows the reach that we're getting, and it makes me feel good. It makes me proud to be a part of the organization, because we work hard to try and share these stories and broadcast these races. And this is just showing that what we're doing actually has merit and has an effect.
Yeah. Is it harder than your old days broadcasting more traditional sports?
I no, I think this is easier in a lot of ways. Number one, you're not on a dedicated clock the same way you are. Like, for instance, when I used to do high school basketball or football back in my younger days, sometimes you had to, be very mindful of your seconds. Whereas you don't have to be exactly on the clock when you're covering a 200-mile race or even a 100K. It is weird to talk about like a 100K being, quote, too short to do some of the fun things that you want to do. One of the things that we've started to do is do more sub ultra coverage. We covered the Dirt Circus 10K National Championship last year in Arkansas, and that was actually a big eye opener for myself and AJW as we were broadcasting it for the first time. It was the first time we had to actually shut up and let the action speak for itself. Like, we had to be very careful that we were not stepping on the coverage.
Yeah. And that's something that some of the great announcers of all time talk about too, of sometimes you just let the moment speak for itself, or you hear the crowd noise or something like that. That's pretty amazing. You're kind of talking about it the same as them, be in the broadcast hall of fame someday.
That would be cool, but that's one of the things that people, when people ask about, the calls that I enjoy the most. I mentioned, Cocodona and Javelina. There was a call a few years ago at Cocodona that I was embarrassed at how poor I did. What was the gentleman's name? It was the one that was on the cover of UltraRunning magazine. I'm so embarrassed. I was going to say Kevin, but um, I think it was 2022's final finisher, and it was a powerful moment, and I got emotional on the live stream. And I look back at that and I'm like, man, I should have just shut the hell up. Like, I should have just kept my mouth shut and let the moment speak for itself. And that was a big learning experience. And I felt bad about stepping on his moment because I'm tumbling over my words. But I did learn from the experience. And now, like, for instance, last year when we were watching the final finishers at Cocodona, AJW and I are sitting there in the studio, and all of a sudden we just kind of looked at each other, nodded, and just didn't say a word for like the final minute or two of the race, and just let the runner coming in soak in the accolades of everybody cheering them on.
Yeah, it is so special at the finish. There's the tunnel of people too. Was it Stephen Park? Is
Yes,
that?
Stephen Park. Thank you. Thank you. It was
Yep.
Stephen Park's finish where I talked over it and I should have just not.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a crazy thing because you're grading yourself on a scale of nearly perfect, and it's, 100 hours or so of broadcasting.
Well, the tricky part is that we're in a bit of a weird space that nobody's ever done what we've done to the length that we've done it. I mean, you think about how many people have actually done this, like, more than a couple of times in the entire world. I mean, you're talking
Mhm.
like me, AJW, Dylan Bowman, Corinne Malcolm, Corinne Shalvoy, Skylar Hall. Like, there's like less than 10 of us that have done,
We
like,
gotta throw Matt Feldeg's
Matt
name in there
Felday,
because
Rob
the first
Ricardo.
year he stayed up for, like, 2 days straight.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's yeah, and Matt felt like, I can't wait to see him again, hopefully this year at Cocodona. But he, like he's another one of the, there's only a handful of us that have done it. So we're kind of like trying to grade ourselves on a curve that doesn't exist. Like you
Yeah.
can compare what we do to, baseball, football, basketball, where there's a tried and true template. What we're doing,
Mhm.
I mean, even compared to other running, like people have said to me, oh, maybe you should put your hat in the ring to do some, Olympic trials broadcasting or some marathon broadcasting. I wouldn't know how to handle that. Like they're on, like if you're on a network covering a, track and field championship, you've got to hit your marks. You've got to be perfect. Whereas, we get to tell stories that they don't get to tell. Like they're calling it right as they see it, and so there's a balance though, because we have to, and I try my best to not overwhelm the viewer with the story, with my stories. We got to make sure it's the runners that are on course that are being focused upon.
Yeah, it's a really hard balance too in, I guess, the both the storytelling, but also, letting the action going out to the field and everything too. How do you communicate with what's going on out there? Are you just looking at live tracking like everyone at home, or do you have inside information?
I would say that 80 to 90% of it is what the people at home have. It's kind of interesting because I've done some research into other broadcasting. Like for instance, and this is going to be my favorite example. I'm a big pro wrestling fan. And
Okay.
when you watch and you see the broadcasters on pro wrestling, they're sitting ringside. So you would think that they're calling it as they see it on like live before their eyes, but they're literally watching the monitors so they can actually make sure that they're following what everybody else is seeing. So with the fact that we don't have a lot of other views, we used to have we changed the studio setup a couple of years ago where like maybe we would have like 7, 8, 9 different feeds at times and like, okay, can we go to this feed? Can we go to that feed? Well, that's the producer's job now. So
Yeah.
like we basically just have the feed that's on the air and we can ask for a switch. We're not like so professional that we have to like do it in code or anything like that. I do use a lot of hand signals as I'm in the studio, and thankfully Jordan Schmidt, he figured things out very quickly. Like if I start to, like act like, something's going on, then he'll kind of perk up and figure out why I'm like freaking out at what's on the screen. Maybe we want a better shot or another angle or, to find out something else that's going on. But I feel like you know, the the decisions are now made in the hands of the producers, and that's probably for the best so we can concentrate on our storytelling.
Totally. Yeah, and it's hard too when, like, the video coming in is a little grainy, but you're still trying to announce, you don't know who the video is of too. It's like, I don't know, it's a very special set of skills because sometimes you get very little information, but you're supposed to use that and tell something.
It's very tricky, and that's one of the things that I've tried to get better about, just little things. Like, for instance, at Black Canyon, a few weeks ago, I tried my best to write down what every elite was wearing at the start line, because a lot of times, when you're looking at somebody from a drone shot at, 40 yards out, it's hard to do it unless you like know exactly what they look like or if they have a very distinct gait. Like for instance, I
Mhm.
can pin Courtney DeWalter's run from like, 100 meters away, even if it's like a completely pixelated shot. But if it's like Eli Hemming, somebody who I didn't know very well at Black Canyon, I had to basically wait and see and make sure and check my notes. Okay, white top, black shorts, etc. So that's one of the things that we always try to do. And maybe that's why we kind of fall into some icky little pratfalls, like for instance, talking about people as like orange shirt guy, orange shorts guy. It's not the most professional, but people on the live stream seem to understand where we're coming from. And
Yeah.
as the sport grows, thankfully the technology has gotten a lot better. I mean, I'm sure you can see that looking from even just, 4 years ago.
Mhm.
But there are going to be people who tune in who are not familiar with and understanding with our limitations. Like, they maybe are expecting a network quality broadcast and we just don't have the network quality equipment. We'll have clear shots for most of the time, but we're not going to, I mean, there are going to be points where, maybe the phone that we're on is not going to be a great camera phone, or maybe we are going to be in a low coverage area. We do what we can. And for the most part, when somebody comes into the chat and maybe was complaining, they'll get set straight by those loyalists who have been around a long time, and they understand. They're like, 5 years ago, we didn't have this at all. And now we've actually got something. And if it is a little bit of grainy footage of Jeff as he's going through Fort Tuthill, well, you know what? We'll take that footage. So,
Yeah, and I think that the chat is almost the secret weapon too, because people are engaged in whatever is playing, but it's still fairly moderate paced running. And then they have this chat though that they is updating continually. And with the popularity, that's been kind of the coolest thing to see is you just hang out in the chat and you're worried less about what's playing or what video is coming through. You're just listening to the commentators and playing in the chat.
well, the chat can be it's a double-edged sword. When things are going well, the chat is great. When things are not going well, the chat lets you hear about it. And that's something you have to learn to balance. Like there are times where the chat is truly adding. Like for instance, there's nothing I enjoy more than finding out about a runner whose wife is watching or husband is watching on the live stream, and they're able to provide detail on a runner as they're making their way through, especially those mid and the back of the packers that we're getting to learn about over the course of the maybe the second half of the race. Now, there are other times, like for instance, if we're having some severe technical difficulties, that I might actually literally just shut my laptop and just kind of engage in conversation with my broadcast partner, or something to that nature. Maybe it's time to go to a commercial. So, like that kind of thing. But the chat for the most part has been a good thing. I do worry, as I mentioned, about the people coming in with certain expectations of broadcast quality, where like you'll see it on some of the larger events. In particular, I think Western states is where it happens the most, where there are a lot of people tuning in maybe to a live stream for the first time, and it might not be to their expectations, but we do our best, and I try and remember that for every person that comes in for the first time, that's a potential viewer for the next time as well. And we've seen it
Mhm.
on Cocodona. I mean, I think that my favorite thing about Cocodona or one of my favorite things about Cocodona is the fact that we have the most captive audience in ultra running when it comes to that race, because we start at 5 a.m. local time on a Monday, and we're on till Saturday. And when you have a Saturday broadcast for like a Western States or a Black Canyon, it's an imposition to ask people to take out of their long run time or their weekend time where they could be doing other things. When you got a 9 to 5 society that is sitting at a computer with 3 screens and having to try and find something to maybe engage their mind outside of what they're doing on their spreadsheets or whatever, they can have a window open to the live stream. And our numbers for Cocodona on a Tuesday morning or a Wednesday afternoon are just out of the park, because people are just kind of tuned in and listening. They might not be engaging in the chat. They might not even be watching very closely, but I think that they just love feeling that attachment to the outside.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just an event that's live during the day is so novel. That's why I love the Olympics, like throw on curling in the background.
Yeah.
It's just like a live event is still something that's so special because TV is no longer appointment viewing. It's really just whenever you want to stream something, but the live nature of it going on, and then they get to know you on the live stream. They might even get to know your in-field, correspondence, your live streamers helping out. It's just you build a relationship over all those days. It's almost like just becoming a friend to you or something. It's a very cool concept.
Well, we just got through with the first weekend of March Madness. Like that's an excellent
Yeah.
example of that. Like people are glued to it on Thursday and Friday, heading into the first weekend of the tournament. And I think that you're right about that. That part of that is the fact that it's their first time, that they're getting live sports in the middle of the day, for you know any period of time. So
Yeah. Why do you think Aravaipa is so good at it? Because we've seen a couple other races or organizations try to pull off a live stream, but it just seems like they don't have the staying power or the ability so much so that Aravaipa is invited to, or Mountain Outpost is invited to live stream races they don't own.
I think it's a couple of things. Number one, it's the reps. Like we've had more reps than anybody. Think about like those people who have been on all of our live streams or a lot of our live streams. And it's one of the reasons why I try and do as many as possible, simply because I know that more reps are going to make me better.
Mhm.
Number two, we have somebody in charge who will not give up on it. If it were an issue of, like, for instance, if we had a bad live stream or two or five where there was, you know, a very small viewership, like we have some live streams that we do that, like for some of our local things, we started doing our Sonoran Desert Cup here in Arizona. We're not getting monster viewership. We might get a few hundred at our
Mhm.
peak times, but like those are the reps that make us better for the big events. Like for instance, like that's why we are able to hit our marks and tell better stories at Hard Rock and at Cocodona. So I think that the fact that Jamil is so dedicated to it, whether or not it's like a big moneymaker or anything like that, I don't know. I have my assumptions that it's absolutely not. But, it's a labor of love, and I feel like as long as he believes in it and he believes in sharing the experience and the stories of these races, then I think that we're gonna have a future in it. I mean, it's not everybody's cup of tea to sit for 8, 16 hours and watch people run, but there
Mhm.
is a very rabid, very dedicated base in our audience, and I'm glad that we're here for them.
It almost works in favor that much like a Barkley Marathons is so captivating because it's so unimaginable and so ridiculous in so many ways, but to a lot of people, ultra running or trail running is that same thing of like people are running through the night in the woods. I think that type of intrigue really helps it too, because it probably does exceed the rabid fans and more people checking in like, what is this thing? You get sucked into the chat for an hour, learn about an event that you'd never even heard of.
It's wild. So I ran the Crown King Scramble this weekend in Arizona, and I met a woman on the course, and she actually told me, she said, I registered for this race because you wouldn't shut up about it during Cocodona a couple of years ago. And so she said that she was running it for the second or third time and that she brought a friend out from another state to run Crown King. So, the fact that we're able to talk about these events, and I know that that's one of the things I love about having a broadcast partner who knows more about this sport than just about anybody, because like I'm, trying to research about these runners and where they came from. Like for instance, I've learned so much hearing about other races from AJW, from Andy Jones Wilkins, because if he hasn't run it, he's 1 degree removed from somebody who's won it. So like that is one of the cool things, because it's not just, I mean, obviously, we want Aravaipa's races to be, featured at a lot of times, trying to make sure that people are aware of our events, but at the same time, learning about other things, other events like, up in Oregon or back east. Like there's all sorts of events. And I've learned the names of a lot of other events and a lot of other people simply because of the races we cover. Like I've never been to the Pacific Northwest to trail run. I've never been to Ashland and seen their trail scene, but I've learned a lot about it from covering races because I have people who have podium finishes at the Siskiyou Out and Back or Gorge Waterfalls or things like that, or going back east to events there. Like that's one of the cool things. Like I've never been to Stroll and Gym, but I've heard all
Uh-huh.
about Stroll and Gym through people who have run Stroll and Gym that are at the events that we cover. So that's one of the things I love about our race. Like I've learned so much about this sport and so many of the people running in this sport over the past few years that I didn't even think it was possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's just wild, and especially if you zoom out even more to international too, it's just a very different sport as well. Where do you think it's going? Do you think it's always gonna be through YouTube and because that's so much more discoverable, or do you see like a more network style someday?
So I've been asked about this a lot, and my opinion has largely remained the same. I don't think we'll ever see ultra running featured on like a network or even like a cable outlet as a full event broadcast, simply because it's just too much time to for a network to digest.
Mhm.
I do like the fact that we're on YouTube because it's democratized. I mean, the barrier to entry to broadcast nowadays is far less because of YouTube. I mean, can you imagine trying to put together a broadcast, 25 years ago of an event, like the cameras involved? I mean, obviously, like I'm on my phone talking to
Mhm.
you, and that was a pipe dream a quarter century ago. I think that we will see potentially through maybe an ambitious and uh, brave outlet that will get like maybe a trail running featurette type show, like remember This Week in Baseball that they used to
Mhm.
have. I could see something like that, like This Week in Trail Running, where they might have a show where they might do like the rundown of results, maybe do a feature of a community or a race or two interviews. I think that that actually has legs, and I think that
Yeah.
maybe an enterprising network could handle that, or a cable outlet could handle that. I don't think it's gonna be anything bigger than that unless there's some, like, absolutely wild star that either A, takes ultra running and, the pop culture by storm, or B, if some pop culture person, like, were to jump into ultra running. Like, I mean, and we've seen somebody like Goggins come into it, but he's still kind of like, like the sport's still on the fringes. I mean, you'd have to have like somebody like, I don't know, like Justin Bieber come into an ultra marathon. Like that would be like the something that might cause people to change. But unless you were to have like a true A-list star, I think that it's always going to be a fringe sport, and it can be a high level fringe sport. And I think that the
Mhm.
coverage can grow and adapt with a new audience. But I don't think it's ever going to necessarily be, the big thing that some people hope it's going to be.
So I've always thought what there should be is a website like trailrunning247.com, and it's replaying old events, but the chat is live and current. So you're like, I'm bored. I'm going to jump on trailrunning247.com. Oh, okay. 100 people are in the chat. We're watching Western States 2009 or 2020 or something replay slowly, and we're all in the chat. I think that's the community building frontier in way that, because there's hundreds, maybe thousands of hours of footage now building up. We got to have the 24/7 network always having something playing.
Jeff, actually, that's kind of a brilliant thing. And I'm not and not just talking about live streaming, but for
Mhm.
instance, like some of the great films that have been on, put out over the years, some interesting interviews. Like for instance, okay, maybe you can watch the Western States 2020, or well, not 2020 because there wasn't one, but like 2021, and then like coming up after that, you know. A film about Barkley, one of the films about Barkley, or one of the films
Mhm.
about Hard Rock, and then coming up next, Black Canyon 2022, and then after that, some infamous interview like, maybe Zach Bitter with Rogan or something like that. Like that actually might be kind of an interesting, like, way to do that, like a trail runner channel on YouTube that just basically has, quote, "live, not live" programming, where there's, like you said, a live chat that I think would be cool for the most part. I think it would enable people to connect with like-minded individuals. Like, if you're that much of a trail running geek like some of us are, that you're willing to sit and watch that stuff, you might as well make friends in that community.
Yeah, well, if like Unbreakable or something's playing, then you can be chatting like, "Oh, wow, that's so crazy. I forgot Jeff Rose slowed down there to eat more," or something like that. You're reliving some of it with people, or you can be talking about like a 2021 race coverage. You're like, "Whatever happened to this guy who got third?" Like, I don't know. It's one of those ideas, and it's always like reintroducing things or introducing people to new films and stuff because it's always coming out and, advertising ability. I think this is my golden idea here.
Yeah, no, and you bring it, and the way that you describe that right there, like for instance, yeah, Unbreakable is coming up at 9 o'clock tonight. Why don't we
Mhm.
all watch it as a group? Like, to say that to a few friends, because it's one thing to like, watch Unbreakable. Obviously, you can watch, some of these films found on 93 Unbreakable, Life in a Day. You can see them on YouTube, but to be able to watch them at the same time as your friends and other people, like, that actually is a unique idea and could genuinely be used to, I guess, further create ties within the community. I think that, you might be onto something there. So, quickly, put your stamp on that one while you still can.
Yeah, no, tons of breaking news over here. Um, but yeah, I do think that it's just an interesting thought of, I always like to think, what's the next level of things to go to? And it's like live streaming. Well, we built up all this footage that doesn't get played anymore. But yeah, it's like you don't have to talk during a movie, but you can be typing in a chat with your friends about what's going on without ruining the movie.
Yeah, you know what would actually be a lot of fun talking about footage that's not used, to get Jamil to release like a vault of like unused cutting room floor footage of all these races that we've covered. Like that would be wild.
Wow. Yeah. And it's like, and now for the next 6 hours, Jamil sits down with his thrown away footage and talks us through it.
Yeah, I mean, to talk about it or maybe show people stuff that they haven't seen for the first time that actually features them. Like that might be a lot of fun, to like what was their, the runner's mindset kind of thing, where it's basically like, oh, we had footage of you. Like, I've never talked to Dax Hawk about what happened to him the first year at Cocodona. For those that aren't familiar, this was the first time we'd done Cocodona, so we didn't know what to expect. We're flying blind here, literally, because we had a drone overhead, and there's a runner on Senator Highway, and we're like trying to figure out who it is, and like, oh, well, they're heading up the hill. Oh, and they're standing off to the side, and they're throwing up. So, I mean, I kind of wonder what Dax was thinking, in the fact that his private moment was kind of being disseminated for the audience to see. I'm sure he probably wasn't too thrilled with it. Maybe you can look back now on and maybe laugh about it. But I'm sure at the time he's probably like cursing the fact that he's doing this race with actual coverage.
Yeah. And you're nervous. You're like going to the bathroom on camera too, or something like that.
That's one of the things I think that people do get nervous about. And we do everything we can to try and make sure that we basically, if it looks like a runner is getting ready to have a private moment, like our drones are gone. Like if we can tell what's going on, we're gone. So that's one thing that I will say that has been, something that I've noticed, is that we don't have like we're not capturing those kind of moments, thankfully. So
Yeah. Okay. I want to shift gears real quick to, you are running Western States this year. How long of a process was that? And yeah, tell us about the process and what it felt like to get in.
so I ran my first qualifier attempt in 2016. I DNF'd Havlin 100 that year. I ran my first completed qualifier in 2017 and entered the lottery that year. And since then, I had qualified for the lottery every year but one. And so this year I was on year 6 of the lottery, due to one missing and the 2020 not having a lottery for the following year. And what was frustrating to me was the fact that my odds had barely increased over the years. I mean, but with the proliferation of entries, I mean, like I think that my odds had literally gone from like 8% to 11% to 13% over the past 3 lottery cycles. And I was, it's not that I was giving up hope, but it was like, well, this is going to be, a longer process than I thought. I figured that 6 or 7 years would be the flashpoint. And, I was going to be going on 8 years. And I get a text message from Craig Thornley last December, and he says, Chris, I am letting you know you have been offered the Ultra Running Magazine sponsor entry for next year's Western States. If you accept, I will remove you from the lottery, and I will send you the entry link. And as soon as I read that, I really was shocked and super stoked. The first person I called was the person I knew who had selected me, and that was Jamil Curry. And I called him, and he answered on his first ring. And if you've ever tried to contact Jamil via cell phone, that's not an easy thing to do. But he answered right away, and he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm pretty sure you know how it's going." And I thanked him, and he said that he felt that I deserved it. He said that, for everything that I've done with the live streaming, and I do run our local group run events here on a volunteer basis. So, he thought that I deserved it, and I wasn't going to argue, and I appreciate it. I mean, I'm so grateful and so fortunate to have these opportunities. The second person I called was my son, Braden. And he was overjoyed, and I asked him if he would pace me the final stretch of Western States, and he said yes. And every time since then, when we talk, he'll ask how my training's going, and if I say it's not going well, he will remind me that he's not going to Auburn to watch. Like, he wants to run. So it's been an amazing journey even to this point, with so much support, so many people rooting me on and cheering me on, and whether I knew them or not. I mean, obviously my friends have been stoked for me, but people who have reached out in the community who I either knew in passing or didn't know at all are super excited for me. And there's a little bit of pressure there. Feel like you're the everyman that got their shot here. It's kind of a Rocky Balboa thing where I'm gonna give it all I've got, and my training isn't where I need it to be. But I had a big eye-opening weekend this past Saturday where I had a race go as poorly as it could have been from a time standpoint, but I'm still gonna keep fighting. I am not going to withdraw from that race unless I'm legitimately injured. I think that as long as I'm upright and moving forward, I've got a shot. And and yeah, I'm going to do my best to try and prove that Jamil made the right choice. Because as much as it's nice to know that he felt like I deserved it from a community and effort standpoint, away from being on my feet, I want to prove to people and to myself that he made the right choice in terms of the fact that I can run and get it done.
Yeah. So you find out you're in, you make your calls, and then you just like lace up your shoes and you're like, I gotta start going immediately. Is that how you're motivated?
Pretty much. I felt it's weird because I thought that the first couple of runs after I found out were pretty hard, which was weird because I had just run a 100-mile qualifier like 2 months prior, and I felt like I was starting from scratch all over again. But it's gotten better. My volume and mileage has increased over time, and I still need to do a lot more. Like, I started looking at where I was at now versus where I was at a few years ago, and even a few years ago, I felt like I wouldn't have been ready. But this year I've got it. I have no other outs. Like, I have to get it done. I have to be ready. So the one thing I did tell all of my friends is that I am on a can't say no kind of situation where if somebody asks me if I want to run, if I want to go do something, that I have to do it. And I
Mhm.
would say, I think at this point, I've only turned down one run. And I've been getting asked multiple times a week by everybody. So like,
That's awesome.
it is. It's like, I hope that everybody else who gets into Western States for the first time has that kind of support structure, because nobody wants to, you know, see me fall flat on my face out there, least of all me. But the fact that there are so many people trying to do everything they can to help, lift me up and make sure that I'm moving around and motivated is kind of nice. I mean, the fitness has been getting there. I've dropped about 20 pounds since my 100 miler back in October. So, I'm in the right direction. I could stand to get in better shape even than this, but all I got to do is just keep grinding, and hopefully uh hopefully I'll get there. I will say it is kind of wild, like with every passing golden ticket race, watching the field and hearing like, okay, guess what, guess who is lining up alongside you now. It's going to be a wild race at the front, and just to know that I have the opportunity to be like towing the line with these people, it's kind of mind blowing. Now they're going to take half as long as I am, but it's still pretty amazing.
But the beautiful thing about ultra running and trail running in general is no one knows if a time is good. Like maybe 1% of people that are trail runners would know if your Western States time is worthy of winning or worthy of just finishing. It's very cool. Like like in a marathon, people kind of know what normal times are. But if you say you I tell this to the athletes I coach all the time. If you tell people you ran a 100 miler, they don't ask how long it took. They ask about the event, why you did it, what it was like, how you're feeling. They don't care about the time because 100 miles already blows their mind. They don't care if it took 10 days.
Yeah, so what's funny is that my son ran his 100 miler for the first time at across the years. He did the fixed time race, and it took him about 3.5 days. But he was on, like, I had him on governors the entire time. Like, I wasn't going to let him be out there for 20 hours. I pulled him basically after about 12 hours each day, and when it got done, he got his buckle, and one time I asked him, I was like, so, what do people think about your buckle? And he's like, well, a couple people have asked me how long it took, and I think that he, from what I understood, and I might be in misinterpreting him, but it was like if a couple people were thinking, well, that doesn't sound like a lot. That's only like a mile or two an hour, and if I were him, I'd be like, oh, you do it.
Yeah,
Like, if
exactly.
you think that doing 100 miles in 3 days is so approachable, we'll get you set up. We know races where you can do it if you can do it.
Yeah, totally. It's that age too. Was it pretty special? Because you ran a lot with them too there across the years, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty emotional to, his last loop. I tried to tell him to take it easy, and then he came in at around I don't know, an 8:40 pace on that final 100th mile, and he runs in and he goes to ring the bell, and he darn near, like, they have a little, PR bell, and he almost pulled it off the post, but I could tell that he was super, super excited about it. I mean, I was there, my parents were there, so he had his grandparents there, and it was a pretty great moment, and my son is not a runner in high school. He actually, he went out for cross country his freshman year and decided he didn't like it, and the reason why he didn't like it is the fact that he lives in Illinois with his mom, and when he was out here in Arizona, he was out when he was younger, his running was, like, in the mountains and in the desert, and nowadays, it's like, if he were to run with the cross country team, it would be through golf courses and parks and, like, flatlands, and I think that we spoiled him because whenever we go to Silverton, he wants to hike Cunningham Gulch again. He wants to try Handies for the first time. He wants to do all of this ridiculously hard stuff, and, like, that's what intrigues him now. Like, I don't think my son will ever be like, a Western States type runner, but I could see him sliding into a hard rock qualifier or two just because it would be something that he would push himself through.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's the allure of trail running outside of racing anyways, is how you can go to those cool places just a little bit faster than hiking.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Like it's really the most democratized sport out there because we talked about, like, the people that are going to be towing the line at the start at Western States. I mean, if you enter Cocodona, I mean, look at all the people you get to run alongside. I mean, if you enter, Moab or a hard rock qualifier like, Mogollon Monster, you can look over and see, like, a Jeff Browning or a Jeff Garmeyer or a Courtney DeWalter. Like, that's really cool. Like, you don't get to head to a basketball court and play with Steph Curry or something like that.
Yeah, LeBron doesn't usually show up at the YMCA,
His
but
son might soon.
yeah.
Right?
Wow, got him.
Texas
My
trade.
last my last question for you is, do you have any funny stories of behind the scenes or bloopers of live commentating for us to take us out?
Let me see here. As far as bloopers go, oh, okay. So we're not adherent to FCC rules on our live streams, but I do try and avoid swearing or, speaking off color on our broadcasts. I can't say that everybody on the broadcasts is quite as particular about it. So um we were doing the Hard Rock preview a couple years ago, and my esteemed broadcast colleague Andy Jones Wilkins was talking about the fact that, when he did Hard Rock, about, how proud he was of it. And, we're sitting there in a group. I believe that there were 6 of us on the pre-race panel, and all of a sudden he just blurts out, "I did the effing thing." And you can see my face just kinda, like, freeze, and all of a sudden my eyes pop up, and then I kinda side eye the rest of the crowd, and I kinda, like, had this sly little smile. I went back, a couple people pointed it out, and so I went back and looked at it, and Yeah, you can see like I'm like just mortified for a split second that, somebody just dropped an F-bomb on our broadcast. It's not I mean, I'm not perfect when it comes to that stuff, but I've kind of got a good handle on it. I think it's from my years of broadcasting before to make sure I don't, drop bombs on the air. But yeah, sometimes if you want to see me panic, just, and you've been in the studio before, throw out a couple F bombs and see how I squirm in my seat. Like that's one of the things that whenever somebody has dropped that kind of language, I will occasionally find myself squirming in the chair. So that would be the, one that I remember the most, is the fact that I just was completely blindsided by it. But
Yeah.
for the most part, things are what you see on the air is what you see off the air. There's very little crazy stuff that goes on behind the scenes, at least that I could think of offhand. Most of it's it's kind of funny to hear people ask questions. Like, for instance, Nick Curry, we covered him doing the 24-hour American record a few years ago. And people are like, well, hey, did he leave the track at all? No. Well, how did he go to the bathroom? That's for you to figure out.
Yeah, he just held it the whole time.
Maybe. I mean, you can try and figure it out, but yeah, that's another one that people were kind of asking questions like, well, how did Nick Curry do this? And he never saw him go into a porta potty. He never saw him leave the track, but he wasn't going to the bathroom in his pants or anything like that. So, you know, how did it happen?
Magic. Okay, we're gonna do what's called in the business, it's called a callback, I believe. So, would you take us out by announcing the start of Cocodona and get people a little fired up for a month from now?
All right, let's see how I can do this. Like, do you want it like basically the lead up to the actual start of the race itself?
Yeah,
Or
you know how to hit your marks. You got it's starting in 10 seconds. The countdown's begun. You get a couple moments to say something, and then you're sending the runners off.
oh, actually, for this one, actually, if shameless plug here, you can watch the chase, and there will be an
Ooh,
opportunity to hear me do it at my best. But with about 10 seconds to go, we are just about to start the 2025 Cocodona 250, and they're off. Deep Canyon
nice.
Ranch, they've departed. They are heading up to Flagstaff. We will see what happens over the next 5 days as these runners are giving everything they've got to the trails of Arizona.
All right, thanks for listening to the show. That was Chris Worden. I love the fact that he talks about running with his kid too, and getting him his 100-mile buckle and what that kind of means. I think that's such a cool way to introduce things, and that's also why I'm a big proponent of the fixed time style races, because it's so natural to get to whatever your time goal is, and you don't have the pressure of cutoffs to the extent that you do with most races. So check out fixed time races, and we actually put one on very similar. It's called Montana Meltdown. We have a 4-hour, 12-hour, and 24-hour options up here in beautiful Bozeman, Montana. The last weekend in September, just look up Montana Meltdown on UltraSignup and sign up, because we would love to have you out here. It'll be the second year of having this thing, and it went so well the first. We're back for round 2. All right, I am headed down to Arizona for a training camp, and then I'm going to a wedding in LA, and then I'm going to a race to do some video work up in Oregon at Gorge Waterfalls, and so it's going to be a busy time on the road. So stay elite, my friends.